Good afternoon. Welcome to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton, back to open up with you about the latest on the dance scene. How are you doing, folks? It's oh so good, always oh so good to share space and spend time with you. Well, it's Wednesday, and of course, that means that I have the great pleasure of sitting down with a wonderful human. And speaking of wonderful humans, coming up today on the show, Colleen Snell is here with me. Colleen Snell is the artistic director and co-founder of Frog in Hand, and we've got lots to talk about. So stay tuned, stay locked in, and stay right here on CIUT. We're going to take a break and be right back after this. You're listening to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. Welcome back to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. Well, my guest today, the artistic director and co-founder of Frog in Hand, Colleen Snell, is here with me. And now Colleen works with a broad range of dance and arts organizations in a variety of roles. Colleen devises and performs collaborative, site-specific dance theater work. Now, she holds an MA in dance from London Contemporary Dance School. And of course, up next, Colleen, and we're going to be talking about this in the show today. Colleen is incubating a new arts space that will take the form of a geodesic dome. And she's developing a narrative, choose your own adventure style audio app. Both projects will be launching in 2023. I can't wait to dig into this one. Please join me in welcoming Colleen Snell to the show. Colleen, welcome back to Turnout Radio.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It's been a while. It's been some time since we've had an opportunity to sit down on the show.
Yeah, maybe one or two things happened in the world, you know?
Yes, a lot has happened. And I have to say that what has been allowing me to still feel connected with everyone, thankfully, is, of course, this radio show and the fact that many of us get to meet via Zoom and other different forms so that we can really just stay connected and keep each other aware of how we're doing and also what we're up to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been really interesting and exciting to see the festivals coming back. I know Fall for Dance North is on. I actually saw you host a panel the other day at the Meridian Hall. So as people are starting to trickle back to live events and just sort of see how it feels, and it's an interesting time for that.
It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. And I'm so glad to know that you were at the talk back at Fall for Dance North. What a time it's been at Fall for Dance North as well. One of the many festivals that are bringing us together as community, allowing us to share space, engage, talk about dance, and of course, talk about our relationships to dance and each other. And so it's been quite special to see things opening up
Mhm.
and to have that opportunity, Colleen, to get reacquainted with one another as humans and as artists.
And of ways of acquainting ourselves as well. I think it's really interesting, actually, for the listeners who weren't there. There was something really magical and almost surreal about that particular event, because it was a screening of Crystal Pite's work, but it was a film, right? So the film took us backstage to have like a kind of a sense of the pre and post pandemic of working on that piece, and interviews that we wouldn't have seen anyway. It was a really interesting time, and it's been fascinating to see the way the pandemic experience, the things that we've learned, have continued to inform and shape us. And it's sort of like, I feel like I'm reacquainting myself with myself as well, in relationship to the world and
Mm.
people. Yeah.
Hmm. I really like how you shared that, the reacquainting with the world as well. One of the things that has become so clear for me, Colleen, is just how much more, and I've shared this on the show as well, and also mentioned it very briefly on stage at Fall for Dance North, was just how aware I am of breath now. And I was aware of my breath before, but the sound of my breath, because a lot of times now in spaces we are so masked. We're masked and we're breathing differently. We have to be aware of how we're breathing differently. We have to control our breath differently because sometimes we're even teaching masked. And so that reacquainting that we're talking about, I found that that also involves my body, how it's moving, and how it is that I'm breathing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that interests me about the breath is the way that it's sort of a bridge between the conscious and unconscious,
Mm,
and it is something that allows us to check in with ourselves, and you know, find a way of being in dialogue with how we're feeling. And I definitely feel like, um, over the pandemic, that's one of the things that I learned about, was how to just sit and breathe, because sometimes there wasn't anything else that I needed to do.
mm,
It's very strange. Yeah.
right. Now, before we move forward, I should also just enlighten our audience just a little bit. For those of you who are curious, Colleen and I are referring to Crystal Pite Angels Atlas, which was showing at Fall for Dance North on October the 3rd at Meridian Hall. And it was a wonderful screening and allowed for us to, the audience rather, to have the opportunity to not only see the screening, but to hear this talk back with the fabulous artists that were involved. To find out more about that screening, you can visit ffdnorth.com. Now, to come back to this reacquainting that we're talking about, Colleen, I'm curious to know because I just heard you say something that was so key, and I think many of us can identify and relate to what you've just shared. Having those times where it's all that you felt that you could do. How have you been navigating through the pandemic? How has Colleen been?
Oh, I feel like it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to reflect on now, because I'm feeling great. But there were times when I was absolutely not. And I'm interested in the fact that I'm very comfortable and okay sharing that. because I know a lot of people felt a similar way, and I guess what I'm referring to is this sort of roller coaster. I would wake up in the morning and hear the radio. The radio would often wake me up, and I would just take it moment to moment. There were times when I really felt quite anxious, and then there were times when I felt fine and calm, and like everything was going as well as it could, considering. And I think it was interesting to just acquaint myself with a new normal. And in particular, what I found helpful was to make myself a schedule, and to find a way of uh, controlling the things that I could control. So all I would do is, wake up and go outside and do a workout just outside because all the gyms were closed. And it's remarkable how having something to get up and do in the morning, just
Oh,
having one place to be, um, was really helpful. And it's interesting because that's sort of become a tradition that continues on today. And it's been fascinating, I think, artistically and personally, to see the threads that have carried through the pandemic that might, in fact, be here to stay for me for a while.
yeah. Huh. Well, the scheduling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because when things really started to close down and we saw that we had to remain in our homes and what was being encouraged for us, what started to happen for me is that fracture of scheduling a little bit. And so I as well, I can relate to that. I had to put together a schedule and it helped a lot because at the top of the pandemic, I felt a sort of allowance of being able to just move through my workday because I was working from home. I could just move through my workday, but I realized I really needed that schedule that you were referring to. So I had to time block, even time block in breaks to make sure that I wasn't stuck to Zoom all day. Did you find that that interaction of Zoom and the technical stuff that we now needed to bring into our lives in a different way, did you find that that ended up impacting those threads that you speak of somewhat?
Yes, it's really interesting because, I mean, there's the day to day, there's the week to week, and the month to month, right? And so when we got into the summertime, we run something called the Summer Company, which is an 8 or 9 week program of about 30 to 35 hours of work per week. That's like a 7 hour day. And we had to learn how to build a schedule that meant there were times when we were working together with these youth dancers and arts workers online on Zoom, and we had to build in tasks for them to go away from the screen and practice something on their own. And I think that was a very fascinating moment to sit down with our rehearsal director Alice Kavanaugh and our business manager Jessica Sen, and just sort of sit and say, we're building a schedule, but we know we can't practice dance in the way that we used to. So what does that even look like? And it was interesting because it would be something like we would ask our collaborators to go on a walk and just listen to music and observe things, and then come back and journal about it, and then have lunch, and then come back online. It was just we ran workshops like that sometimes too, having to give people a task to chew on their own end, and then come and report back, just so that we weren't constantly online. Because I mean, I can't imagine it must have been so much more challenging for teachers and students, like in high school, for instance, because all of a sudden, all of your entertainment, all of your socializing, and all of your work are all in the same place. So it was kind of a intentionally trying to give us other kinds of experiences that aren't just visual and screen based, but maybe listening to something, or visualizing something, going on walks, intentionally trying to break up that screen.
Yeah, going on walks. Wow. I love that so many of us have become so much more intentional with checking in with ourselves and each other to determine what is it that we need, What is it that we need in order to maintain our wellness, our joy, our peace? So I love that intention. That intention has grown stronger for so many of us.
Yes, it has, and I think it's an interesting um, it's an interesting moment whenever we're disconnected from something that we possibly took for granted before. There is this saying that you don't realize how much you appreciate something until it's gone. And there's that aspect of, for instance, physically partnering one another, being able to lift each other, dance. I remember how much I missed contact improvisation, for instance, just because that spontaneity of bodies running and leaping, it was something that just could not be replaced with anything else. So it's just interesting to return to work and to return to this post-pandemic experience, being informed by a new and a renewed passion for movement and a desire to do work that's very highly physical, not just conceptual, but that comes from a place that leaves us, exhausted after practicing, or feeling like that incredible vigor that we can bring to dancing, how it makes us feel and be together. I felt it actually has been very affirming to go back into the studio as a choreographer and to just want to see the dancers take the whole space.
Yes.
We had a wonderful residency in open spaces at the National Ballet, and those studios are gorgeous and they're so big. And I made a movement phrase that just went, from one side of the room to the other, and then front to back, and then it jumped, and then it landed on the ground. And that was the first thing I made in a studio. And it was just the most enormous movement that I could make. And we did it with, I think there must have been 14 performers on stage at War of the Worlds. It was the way the piece opened. It ended up sticking around because it was just this like movement. I just had this huge hunger to see people dancing and taking up space, because I had been dancing in this room so much, which, as you can see, all you can do really is a ballet bar. And then your arabesque has to be on a diagonal, or you have to open the door to have space for your leg, which is hilarious.
Right. Yeah, it's the moving in our own physical space at home is just so much more different for many of us than it is when we are in our studio spaces. And so I'm envisioning all of those dancing bodies as you're sharing that, just being in movement together, connecting in so many different ways, connecting the spiritual connection, the eye connection, the body connection. I'm thinking about all of that because we do lose some of that, when a great deal of it, rather, when we are put into a situation where we are removed from one another, and we're not created to be separate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we as human beings are created to be separate from one another. So the pandemic put us in this position where we were forced in a lot of ways to be separate. And so how do we reconnect? How do we rebuild? How do we renew? So yes, and yes, Colleen Snell. Yes. Beautifully said. So, Colleen, in your work, you have this wonderful interest and history of talking about and presenting site specific and environment responsive work. Talk to us now about Frog in Hand and how all of the above finds its way into the thread of the work that you do at Frog in Hand.
I think what's interesting about site-specific work is that there are so many different approaches to it, and people can definitely go about it in an intentional and specific way. Getting specific about site-specific. I can't help myself. But I think in my case, the way this came about was that we were emerging artists. I had just come back from England where I was training, and I wanted to make things, had no money, didn't know what to do. And I was here in Mississauga and I couldn't afford any dance space. So it was a really interesting opportunity to just connect with my own backyard, my own neighborhood. And I live in Port Credit, and my neighborhood means parks and lakes and, you know, these beautiful spaces where we can really connect with passersby. And, people walking their dogs would see us rehearsing and these kinds of things. And it's interesting that it didn't start off as an intentional thing, but gradually as we grew as a company, we realized that it was meaningful to work in this way. So we started bringing our dance and our performance into places where the people already were. And we realized that that helped us develop a practice of meeting people where they already are, where they are at, instead of feeling like they had to pay a particular fee to go to a theater. And I think that that has informed us in terms of having this practice of active listening, or at least attempting to as much as we can.
Right.
And feeling like when you work in spaces where there are no walls, you're taking those walls down. It means hopefully that there can be more, visibility for the arts, but also you can invite interruptions in a way that isn't so, precious about things. So there is certain of a vulnerability. Like as an example, we were dancing in a park and we were working for Stories in the Woods, and we had two beautiful dancers working on a duet, and we had someone come up and just sort of say, like, what are you doing? Is this Tai Chi? And it was a beautiful opportunity to just sort of talk about what they had seen. But then also for the performer, they just have to kind of get used to that as a way of working, because we're so used to everything being, in a studio hermetically sealed.
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that through the pandemic, I realized that this wasn't just a make do, but it could be an actual intentional choice to continue working this way. Because when the pandemic hit and the theaters closed, we were very impacted in a like everyone, but in a different way, because it meant that all of a sudden we had no indoor spaces at all. So we were outside all the time, and we were visible to passersby, and we started to meet people in public spaces. So it's just a very different kind of practice. I started to realize that we could be placemakers, because by reoccurring in public spaces and starting to become, or commune with the spirit of those places, see people who walk their dog every day at a certain time. It was different than just deciding to kind of put on a show for entertainment purposes, and that perhaps we could learn from people who have been working in parks and in public spaces for a long time. People like Maybell Arts, Clay and Paper Theater, people who bring the arts to quote other places. And that's really different than just making like a site specific immersive show, although that is something that I'm interested in as well, because we have the incredible creativity and virtuosity of people like Punch Drunk on one hand, and on the other hand we have, so we have the virtuosity of the people who are creating site-specific dance performances. And then on the other hand, there's this community and placemaking aspect to it. And I believe that the excitement I have with Frog in Hand has to do with those two things meeting. So that it's about meeting people in public spaces and listening to what's already happening there, as much as it is about putting something into that space that is a dance or something artistic. Yeah.
I think it's really powerful when you said the spirit of those places.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's really powerful. Because what I'm also considering is when dancing in those site specific spaces and being so close to the elements,
Oh yeah.
to the water and the wind, and having an opportunity to be close to things like the trees, to being able to touch the grass, to feel the rain on your skin. If ever there's an opportunity where the rain does happen, being outdoors, I think, allows for the spirit of the people, the energy of the people, and also the spirit of the land to be in connection with that as well. And so I like that you've used, I think that's really powerful, that word spirit.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that you don't get that in a studio. And there are obviously pros and cons, because there's a certain like, it gets real when you're out there and there is a thunderstorm, or we had sort of a dramatic puddle that was almost a flood situation, and all you can do is in 2020 all we could do is go to our car, or 2021 go to your car, because there was nowhere else you could shelter.
Right.
You're having to incorporate care practices, checking in with everyone, giving them tick spray, and making sure that we wear hats, because the sun when you're out there for weeks and weeks it's intense. Like, there's glare, you have to protect your skin. So there's beauty to it, but also there's a certain intensity to being outside, and to being part of it. You realize that you're not separate from it. It's
Right.
in fact affecting your body, and that's a really important part of the process. I think that again, working here in Mississauga, you notice there are turtles, there are herons in your dance studio. You're hearing birds call, or you're seeing cormorants fly along the lake, and this is part of our landscape. And that's just very different than, for instance, being in a black box theater. And I have nothing against those. I love a black box theater. I just feel like both ways of working are important. And that's something that I learned, and I never really want to go back. I want to be able to have both. And also have places to shelter, because we were working outside in the elements, fully visible to the public, with nowhere to shelter for 2 years. And that was full of really beautiful experiences. But also, like I said, it had an intensity to it that made me realize we couldn't just keep doing that for a long time. And I wanted to be able to find ways of working outside, but then also having places to shelter. Yeah.
Hmm. I'm curious, how did working in that way, stepping outside of a theater space and working among the elements, working under this big open sky, how did that, or did it rather, shift any part of how it is that you create work?
Well, the piece that we were creating, we were remounting a piece in 2021 that was about climate anxiety. I call it cli-fi, or science fiction that's inspired by climate change, or is reacting to changes we see in the environment. And we were engaging in a process of, it's kind of art speak, but futuring, which is just imagining what the landscape you see would be like in 50 or 100 years. So we actually created characters who were living in that imaginary landscape. But what's interesting about science fiction, and why I'm so drawn to it, and I create a lot of science fiction stories that are dance, is because it's a way of being in the present moment, to just sort of observe what's happening now and then project the consequences of that forward. So I don't know how that answers the question, but I think it absolutely percolates through the work. It affects the work. And I think it has to do with, so one of the things that I do as a choreographer is called world building, which is creating imaginary worlds that our audience can be invited to enter for a short while with us. And I've realized my sister Noelle and I have been teaching world building as one of our classes. And we've realized that there are sort of two sites to our work. There's the physical place where we're performing, and then there's the imaginary place. So as an example, I can be in a theater, or I can be in a public square, or I can be performing in, an elevator. But then there's also the imagined place, which is sort of the setting of the story. And so that's one of the things that really has impacted me and has made me realize that I can choose to set my action as a storyteller in the space that we're physically seeing, or I can kind of give it a flavor of the imaginary, or I could completely reimagine it and recreate it. So I could say that we are in we're doing a performance in a pool, but we're going to imagine for a moment that that's an ocean, or that we're actually going to build something. So for 2022, we created War of the Worlds Reimagined, and we were in an arena. So it was essentially putting on a show indoors in a giant empty space. And it was a skating rink, but there was no ice, and all the lights could turn off. So we were both in an arena and in a liminal space that was just giant and empty. And I think that way of working, by working outside and inside and in studios and in sort of parks and things, has helped me to understand both what the space is giving me and what I can give back to the space as someone who's imagining the where of the choreography. And that's one of the things that happens first for me, is imagining the where, and then thinking about narratively, who are my performers and what are they doing there, but a lot of it is pulled out of the where. That's a long answer.
It's a beautiful one, though, because I want to unpack this. When you are thinking about what you're giving back to the space as well, that's an important question. I've had quite a few different conversations with artists in which we are talking about how it is that we are leaving space. So when we're presenting a work, what happens to that work afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to the premise of the work, the idea of the work? And when we place it in a theater space and share it with audiences, what happens after when we leave that space? And so I started to think about, with regards to what you've just shared in terms of even giving back to the space, I started to reflect on those conversations. So when we've given and shared a work in a space with an audience, and then we leave that space, is the work now given to the space? Have we just placed our blood, our sweat, our tears into the structure of that space with the work that we've just delivered there? And what else have we given to the space? Have we given that space our thoughts and feelings and a taste of the spirit of who we are? That question of what are we giving to the space, I think, can be interpreted in different ways. Is the space the actual building? Is the space the people within it? Is the space all of it? So I really like that thought. What are we giving to the space?
I do believe that people are a site, but that space is a witness. And as you describe, if the space is witness to us and that it is somehow absorbing or is changed by or is receiving what it is we've done, then we're communing with something outside of time, because space transcends time. So it's almost as if I can stand here and put on a performance or do a dance class or simply walk through that space, and I can be in contact with all of the things that have happened there and will happen there. And in that way, there's a bigness to it, and there's a real deep spirituality that I feel when I connect to space, because I feel like I really can transcend time. I can just listen to all of the stories that might have happened or will happen. And that's a very real thing. I think it's a very spiritual, but it's a very real thing that other people's feet have passed here, or beyond the human as well. I think it's important to make space for stories that are, about the flora, the fauna, about the cats who have passed this way, about the birds and the trees and the leaves. Because when we are so human centric, I think we forget, again, our place in the larger picture, and in the larger timeline, and in the larger place where we exist, and we're only a small part of that. So to create site specific work for me is to commune with something that is much bigger than myself, and is in fact a whole universe that's both imagined and real. And to be part of that dialogue, and to understand that I need to equally witness and listen, and shape and give and offer something, not just as a performance, but as part of almost the heritage of that existence. I think it's magical. I think that's one of the reasons I do what I do. It's also really fun to invite other people into the process, because they will see and feel and imagine different things.
Oh, wow. Colleen, you are really just taking me to in so many different directions here, and I'm really thinking about how powerful it is when we consider that when we walk through space, that so many other feet have been there. Yes, so many other pairs of feet and thoughts and ideas, our ancestors walked through those spaces, different individuals who are coming with wonderful, beautiful, spiritual experiences. And so when you share all of that, it really invites us to consider the enormity, really, of what space is, and really in how we think about what space is, whether it's inside of four walls or outside of four walls, to really consider that every single time that we place our hands on that tree, that there were countless other people who were coming with so many stories that touched that tree before us. And so just being so mindful, Colleen, of what it means when we step into space, and the enormity of the stories, the lived experiences, the hurt, the pain, the excitement, the joy of so many countless individuals that have walked and breathed and lived and passed on and transitioned in those spaces. It invites us to think about all of the above. That's beautiful. Welcome back to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton, sitting down with the absolutely fabulous Colleen Snell is here in the house with me. Colleen, I am so enjoying our conversation today. And as we're talking about space and illuminating space and considering how we live and breathe in space, I'd love to talk about one of the things that we had discussed prior to today's conversation, which is initiating arts from a place of service and not entertainment. And I know that this area of thought is something that is important to you as well. So share your thoughts with us, please. Let's talk about that initiating
Mm.
arts from this place of service and not entertainment.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know we don't have a lot of time, but we do have a lot of problems in the world. We have a lot of significant um, challenges to the point where I recently learned the plural for crisis would be crises, is an es, I believe, on the end. We have multiple existential difficult things that are facing us. And my question has been, in the face of these truly frightening things that we're facing, what can the arts do, or what can we provide to the conversation? Because we know that the arts have the capacity to heal, to transcend barriers or boundaries. They have the capacity to console or to reveal. There's so much that can be done with and through the arts. And I think that, again, I'm witnessing some folks in Toronto mainly, who are really an inspiration to me and who kept working through the whole pandemic. And the things that they were doing were not only putting on a show. People like Maybelle Clay and Paper Theater, who've been working in parks for 25 years. Maybelle formed the Maybelle Pantry, which of course started to become an arts infused experience for their neighborhood, where people could come and meet each other and also take food home, because food insecurity is such an issue. And there are all kinds of things like this that got me thinking, what can Frog in Hand do, and what does our community need? And I think this is where the art shelter comes in for me, because we have an initiative that's been funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation to build an art space. But it's a very unusual art space. As you said, it's a geodesic dome, which means it's a dome-shaped thing. It's going to be semi-transparent, and it's going to be a space where we can build back differently with resilience, and we can quite literally make a space where many people and things and practices can happen, where we can gather safely together. So it'll be an indoor-outdoor space that's created for the post-pandemic world we're in. And like I had said, what we were talking about earlier in this conversation, we can still work outside and feel the wind and see the trees. And, we're actually working with the Lakeview partners in the Lakeview neighborhood. So that's an area in transition. It used to be the home of a coal-fired plant, and now it's being revitalized and changed. So we're going to be part of that placemaking moment. And I think what's interesting about this opportunity is to listen deeply and to continue to work in the ways that we have been working, not just to go and build a thing and impose on the space, but to be in community and to commune with what's called the genius loci, which is the spirit of place, and to think about how our work can invite many, many different practices and people to be part of this, so that we can be together. And this comes from certain experiences, like the In Situ Festival with Creative Hub 1352, which is a Mississauga company.
Right.
brought all kinds of different people together. And it didn't matter about the discipline, you know? So we're just sort of learning and listening and putting forward a space into our community.
And the art shelter, Colleen, that Frog in Hand is working on, is that where we will see a lot of that initiating that you've shared with me, that initiating and focus of creating arts from this place of service and not entertainment will live?
Yes, I think there's more that needs to be learned. In particular, I want to learn from sustainable design. So that's one of the ways that we can build back differently and act in spirit, or I should say in service, um, is by creating something that is sustainable and conscious environmentally, so that it's thinking about not only the next 5 years, but the next 50. And if our actions are, thoughtful in that direction, also building a home, not only for ourselves and our creative work, but also inviting residencies for other artists. There's not a lot of professional arts infused spaces um, that are mid scale in Mississauga. So building space for that, but also we know that our patrons or audiences have been isolated. They have been anxious. They have realized the importance of gathering, and we need to give them safe spaces to do that, to be together, and to imagine and to feel heard.
Mm. And is the art space, the dome that we're speaking of, is that something that is going to take up space temporarily, or is that something that's going to be permanent?
We have a 5-year lease in place with the Lakeview Partners. So it's a semi-permanent space. The geodome is from a company called Arctic Acres. So it's 42-foot diameter. So it's quite a large thing, but it goes up in pieces. And the reason I give you that detail is because one of the things I've been thinking about is how, I mean, the listeners to this will be very familiar with the loss of Hub 14. Dover Courthouse is vulnerable right now. Dance Makers has been kicked out of their space. Same with Nightwood Theatre and Tapestry Opera. So that's another reason why we want to build a space that is for the post-pandemic, that is resilient. So if it needs to, it can fold like a hermit crab, and we can carry our house on our back and relocate it somewhere else. So it is a semi-permanent space, but it has a long-term vision.
Okay. And so, how do we come together to see this dome come alive? Like, how can the community become involved in what Frog in Hand is doing with the dome?
Well, I think one of the best ways to get involved is to reach out. We're on Instagram and on social media, but also we want to find meaningful ways of connecting with various communities so that we can listen and learn from what people want to see happen here. So if you're someone who has a creative project or you want a residency, we will be doing open calls, probably not till April 2023 is the construction of the dome. We're going to be looking for all hands on deck to help us build it and have a party when that does happen and it goes up, a barn raising party. And I think the best way is to just follow our story. And there are so many ways of connecting. And we're hoping to do things like community soundings and bring different kinds of platforms together, both digital and in person, ways of connecting about what this space could be so that it's shared and it's not only our vision.
Wonderful. Thank you, Colleen. And I know that in the space of that as well, there's also an app that you're developing. This
Oh my goodness.
narrative, choose your own adventure style
Yes.
audio app. Talk to us about that.
So what has happened over the pandemic is we realized that, first of all, live experiences couldn't be replaced, and we needed a way of gathering safely and in person. So that's the art shelter. And then we also made radio plays and dance films, and we realized, like a lot of people did, that digital platforms are very intriguing and that we could develop our artistry in that direction. So we made a radio play called War of the Worlds Reimagined that we then danced to. We used it as our soundtrack. But making a radio play was a really exciting and interesting experience. And it made me realize that we could build a radio play that was interactive, just like a choose your own adventure novel. This isn't just my idea. I'm working with Miquelon Rodriguez and Andrew Gabriel as my writing team. We're working together. And we're building an app so you can experience what is essentially an immersive audio-based game on your phone that is interactive, and that comes from creating immersive experiences for a long time. It's shows and things, experiences that happen all around you. And so this app is just a continuation of that kind of experience into the digital realm. And it's funded by the Canada Council's Digital Now program, which has really been supporting and encouraging artists to bring the learning and the knowledge that, we had to use to survive and to keep creating, but to bring it forward and to create audacious projects that are still digital. So we're not just dropping all of that. We're continuing to create things that are digital and exciting. My hope for this project, it's called Anomaly, is that although it's based on a screen, because it is something that you can experience through audio, that it'll still feel very immersive and it won't be primarily visual. So as a digital initiative, it's kind of different in that way. And I mean, if you're listening to radio right now, you know that radio is it brings beautiful visual kind of things to mind, right? It's the theater of the imagination. That's the expression I was looking for. Radio is the theater of the imagination. So when we have an audio-based immersive experience, it can be really exciting because it really lights up our brain. And I'm excited to share that probably in June 2023. So that one is a very ambitious project, but it's coming along nicely. We're in early phases of writing it now.
Well, I am excited to learn more. Please do stay in touch with us. I want to learn more, Colleen, and I am looking so forward to talking about immersive experiences with you again in the future. Before we go, Colleen, what do you have coming up at Frog in Hand?
Well, actually, this is a great question, and it's another way people can get involved and can meet Frog in Hand in a digital studio or live in person. We have a fall writing circle class with Andrew Gabriel, a world building for choreographers class that's led by myself, a dance on film class out here in Mississauga, but live and in person, and finally an asynchronous and synchronous hybrid grant writing basics class that people can find on Eventbrite.
Excellent. Lots coming up at Frog in Hand.
Always.
What a joy it was to sit down with you today. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you again for having me, and thank you for all you do with Turnout Radio in helping to have these really beautiful conversations about what we do. It's wonderful to have a chance to share.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. It's truly my pleasure. I have to say that, I want to say rather that it really brings me more joy than some would know to have conversations like this, because the heart of who we are and what we do, there's so many layers, isn't there? So many layers and so many stories and so much history that came along before you and I. And to know that we get this opportunity to sit down and have tea together, or hot cocoa in this case today, and to have these conversations is so meaningful. And so I thank you for, here's the hot cocoa. And so I thank you for not only saying that, but for sharing your voice, your thoughts, your ideas, your vision, and your history with us as well. Thank you, Colleen, for joining me today. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Today you are listening to the sounds of Cannonball Adderley with Autumn Leaves and John Coltrane with Blue Train. That was the artistic director and co-founder of Frog in Hands, the absolutely wonderful Colleen Snell. Thank you, Colleen, again for joining me on today's show. And thank you to all of you for tuning in, gathering with us, and taking time to sit back and be a part of today's broadcast. Be sure to visit us at turnoutradio.com to take in this conversation again, as well as many others that we've had the opportunity to bring to you over the years. Technical production of today's broadcast was facilitated by the absolutely fabulous Amber Downeyback. Join us again next week for more of Turnout Radio. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton, and I hope your week finds you turning out to dance.
TUYAIOUT 89.5 FM, the sound of your city. Stream us anytime at www.ciut.fm.